The night of May 1st marked a tectonic shift in the Iranian security landscape. While Tehran's state-run press TV scrambled to frame the Zanjan explosion as a routine ordnance clearance accident across a 1,200-hectare zone, commercial satellite imagery from Planet Labs tells a far more lethal story. The blast pattern suggests a high-yield synchronized detonation, not the erratic secondary explosions typical of a clearance mishap. 14 elite operators from the Ansar Al-Mahdi P protection unit were vaporized in a 30-second window. Among the fallen was Senior Commander Ali Musavi Havayi, a man whose presence at a supposed clearance site defies all established military doctrine. This wasn't an accident, it was a surgical decapitation of the regime's inner sanctum. Do you believe the next precision strike, enabled by these deepening leaks, could reach directly into the leadership core in Tehran itself? Share your analysis in the comments below, because this internal war is moving faster than any official narrative can contain. And your perspective matters as events continue to unfold. If you want to stay ahead of every development in this breaking conflict, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications right now. Our detailed breakdowns continue without pause. For those long drives or quiet moments when you want the full picture delivered straight to your ears, join us on Spotify through the link in the description and never miss an update no matter where you are. The regime that once positioned itself as the Middle East's dominant force is now fighting for survival on its own streets, while its naval reach at Hormuz withers and its internal defenses collapse under the weight of its own failures. This is not a temporary crisis. It is the visible unraveling of a system that has finally turned its own weapons inward. The operation bore every hallmark of a deep penetration cell strike rather than any accident. In standard munitions clearance protocols, no elite VIP protection unit clusters its senior operators in one dense formation at a single point inside a contaminated zone. That kind of grouping defies every basic rule of operational security and force protection. Yet here they were, the regime's most trusted bodyguards and planners, gathered exactly where the blast wave caught them all at once. Open source intelligence tracked by outlets, including the Times of Israel, and reports filtering through regional sources like Al Arabiya painted a clearer picture. The coordinates that guided the strike did not come from some foreign drone or external commando team. They came from inside the system itself. Low-ranking IRGC personnel and support staff who had watched their salaries collapse into worthless scraps of paper under the crushing weight of the U.S. naval blockade and rial freefall had sold the schedules and locations for cash or food. The Immortal Guards, operating in small cell structures that blend into the daily rhythm of bases and checkpoints, simply acted on the intelligence their own comrades in arms had leaked out of desperation. This isn't just about external commandos, it's about a deep state mutiny. With the Iranian rial in freefall and the US naval blockade choking the IRGC's parallel economy, military loyalty has become a black market commodity. Low-tier personnel whose salaries have turned to scrap paper are now selling high-level coordinates for basic survival. The Immortal Guard didn't need to break in. They were invited in by the regime's own hungry soldiers. The result was a surgical decapitation strike that removed 14 core operators from the regime's nervous system in one heartbeat. Those men were not ordinary soldiers. They were the brains behind close protection details and rapid reaction planning for the highest levels of power. Their loss left a gaping hole that no amount of state media spin could paper over. That single night in Zanjan sent shockwaves straight into the bunkers where the supreme leader and his inner circle now hide. Commanders who once exported chaos across the Middle East suddenly found themselves jumping at shadows inside their own capital. Daily routines were shredded and relocated without warning. Security details were rotated at random hours. Even the Ansar Al-Mahdi survivors who escaped the blast began looking sideways at their own colleagues. Unsure who among them might be the next leak or the next trigger, the psychological collapse is total. A leadership that spent years perfecting the art of targeted killings abroad now lives in constant dread that the same method has been turned inward with lethal accuracy. Every meal, every meeting, every movement carries the risk that a trusted aide or guard has already passed coordinates to the Immortal Guards waiting outside the wire. This is not abstract fear, it is the raw, gut-level terror of men who know the protective shield they built has been pierced from within by the very forces they once commanded. The regime's response to this bleeding wound has been a frantic attempt to regain control where it still can the digital realm. Ordinary citizens have been shoved into a deliberate information blackout, while a privileged few connected to the elite receive special white SIM cards that grant restricted internet access. This is not simple censorship. It is an active effort to sever the population from the outside world and prevent the spread of images showing IRGC checkpoints overrun and explosions lighting up the night. Civilians caught with Starlink terminals have paid with their lives. One documented case involved a man named Ham Aladdin beaten to death in his own home simply for accessing uncensored information. The regime treats a satellite dish like a weapon of mass destruction because it knows the truth is its greatest enemy, yet the blackout is failing. Starlink and other resilient satellite links continue feeding video and data to analysts and media abroad, shredding the official narrative that everything remains under control. Every leaked clip of burning IRGC vehicles or dispersing checkpoints lands like another blow against the information monopoly the regime once took for granted. The economic strangulation feeding this internal hemorrhage comes directly from the U.S. naval pressure in the Strait of Hormuz. Commercial traffic has been forced back into port under constant inspection. IRGC-linked vessels attempting to slip through face-boarding teams and seizure. The cash flow that once funded the massive parallel economy of the Revolutionary Guard has slowed to a trickle. Lower-ranking soldiers and militias, who once believed in the system, now stand at checkpoints with empty stomachs and worthless pay. That reality has turned loyalty into a marketplace commodity. Intelligence on patrol schedules, VAP movements and ammunition depot locations is being sold to the highest bidder, or traded simply to feed families. The same economic despair that produced the coordinates for the Zanjan strike is spreading through every layer of the IRGC. Commanders no longer trust the men beneath them. Decision-making has slowed to a crawl as every order is second-guessed for fear of immediate betrayal. Elite units have pulled back into defensive postures, while whispers of quiet mutiny circulate among officers who see no future in a collapsing structure. On the streets, the Immortal Guards have shifted from sporadic protests to organized asymmetric strikes that target the regime's exposed nerve endings. In Tehran, the grand avenues that once hosted choreographed displays of power now see hit-and-run ambushes on IRGC patrols. Cells identify weak checkpoints, strike fast with small arms and improvised explosives, then melt back into the urban fabric before reinforcements arrive. In Yazd and Mashhad areas, once considered ideological strongholds, similar patterns are emerging. Paramilitary Basij forces sent to intimidate crowds now find themselves pinned down and outmaneuvered by smaller, more agile groups that know the terrain and the patrol patterns better than their own commanders. The psychological shift is visible. Soldiers hesitate before leaving their posts. Night patrols grow shorter and more reluctant. The visible presence of armed authority on the streets is thinning exactly when the regime needs it most. Each successful strike by the Immortal Guards further erodes the fear barrier that once kept the population in check. Crowds are no longer just chanting. They are watching, learning, and in some cases actively supporting the cells that are systematically dismantling the security apparatus from within. The maritime domain mirrors this internal decay. At the Strait of Hormuz, the IRGC Navy has transitioned from a proactive threat to a reactive, desperate posture. Leaked reports regarding the training of marine mammals for mine planting missions highlight the regime's technological exhaustion. Unable to counter advanced U.S. sonar and satellite-integrated task forces, Tehran is resorting to unconventional low-tech gambles that border on the absurd. This dolphin doctrine is a loud confession of weakness, a sign that their asymmetric reach has hit a wall of absolute desperation as the U.S. naval vice continues to tighten the economic jugular. The power struggle at the top has only accelerated the decay. IRGC hawks have systematically sidelined President Pezeshkian, concentrating decision-making inside their own institutions. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi's team finds itself increasingly at odds with hardline elements in the Justice Ministry. Responsibility for every failure now lands squarely on the Revolutionary Guard, removing any buffer that civilian leadership once provided. This concentration of power has not strengthened the regime. It has simply made the target larger and more obvious for the Immortal Guards watching from the shadows. European capitals already on edge from terror warnings issued by U.S. embassies are hardening their stance further. The weakening of Hezbollah in southern Lebanon under Israeli pressure has removed one more pillar of Iran's regional influence. Unable to resupply or direct its proxies effectively because of the domestic crisis, the IRGC watches its decades-long investment in asymmetric reach evaporate. This internal hemorrhage is now drawing the wary eyes of Tehran's last strategic allies. Moscow, preoccupied with its own fronts, has reportedly delayed crucial supply shipments through the Caspian, while Beijing has begun quietly scouting alternative energy routes, signaling a loss of confidence in the Khamenei regime's longevity. When a state's own elite protection units are hunted in the streets of Zanjan, the geopolitical Hormuz card loses its value. Even the most loyal regional proxies are now bracing for a world where Tehran is no longer the center of gravity. The picture that emerges is one of systematic erosion on every front. The Zanjan strike removed irreplaceable protection personnel. Street-level ambushes are thinning IRGC presence in major cities. Economic desperation is converting former loyalists into intelligence sources for the resistance. Naval operations in Hormuz have been reduced to a holding action under constant U.S. surveillance. Digital controls are leaking around the edges thanks to satellite networks the regime cannot fully block. The same apparatus that once exported revolution and fear now finds itself hunted inside its own borders by forces it helped create and can no longer control. The Immortal Guards are not an external invasion. They are the rot that was always inside the system, now activated by economic collapse and the regime's own brutality. Every explosion, every leaked coordinate, every checkpoint that falls silent adds another crack to a structure that once claimed invincibility. Do you believe the next precision strike, enabled by these deepening leaks, could reach directly into the leadership core in Tehran itself? Click subscribe now. Don't miss a single moment of this historic journey. Your time is valuable. We promise analyses as sharp as reality itself. Stay vigilant, stay informed. We'll see you in the next video.